Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, for those of you joining us from around the globe. And thank you for joining our webinar today entitled Emerging Enterprise Trends Post-COVID. My name is Marc Schlesinger, Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Americas, and I'll be leading our session today. Before we get started, let me just try to set the scene. Entire industries and individual enterprises across the globe have faced an unprecedented disruption in business as a result of COVID-19. Responding to this challenge has placed a spotlight on resiliency in the enterprise like never before. More importantly, as recovery begins, ensuring the enterprise is prepared for the future is becoming a priority for many boards of directors. In addition, rapid adoption of teleworking has placed a strain on network infrastructures and created a forced adoption of internet as the foundation of the enterprise communication infrastructure. Both IT teams and top executives are measuring the business, user, and financial impacts of that shift as they continue to materialize. As part of our Analyst Insight series, we'll be discussing these emerging enterprise IT trends with ISG's Dave Muller, partner from ISG's Network Advisory Services. Before getting into everything today, I wanted to share with you that our session today is part of the Orange webinar series called Business Resilience in All Times. Throughout this series, our intention is to give you information and thought leadership that will support global enterprises through the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. We have over 20 webinars planned in this series that fall into four basic categories. Today, we are presenting part of our Analyst Insight series, where I will be interviewing technology leaders from some of our analysts that we work with on a regular basis. There are three other segments within this series, one of which is called The Next Normal, which is delivered by our friends at Orange Silicon Valley, along with leadership from the Silicon Valley community, to share a perspective on new consumer behaviors within industries, how societal changes are affecting the market, and how emerging threats are impacting business leaders across the globe. The second set of our series focuses on our team from Orange Business Services, and we refer to that internally as Enterprise Solutions Series. This is an opportunity where we get a chance to share with you some of the innovations that we're bringing to market and some of the things and use cases that we've been delivering for our customers. And then lastly is a series entitled Leading with Partners. It's another series that I am leading at present, where I'm taking an opportunity to interview some of our partner leadership resources and getting them to share some perspectives on what's happening in the market today. So that being said, let me remind you once again that today's topic is part of our Analyst Insight series, and joining me will be Dave Muller, partner for ISG's Network Advisory Services. Dave had some great insights to share with us on the emerging trends being seen within the enterprise. Dave, as always, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd also like to introduce my colleague who may be joining us later, Samir Al-Rashidi, who leads our pre-sales and solutions here within the Americas for Orange Business Services. He may be helping us out with some Q&A during the course of our session. However, he's been having some technical difficulties during the course of the morning, so in case he's not there, I'll be assuming those responsibilities. Some quick housekeeping items just to keep everybody on the same page. You can enter your questions with your name automatically appearing for all to see by using the chat area on the right-hand side of your screen. Or if you prefer more private space, then you can anonymously submit questions using the questions area on the right side as well. Only myself, Samir, and Dave will be able to see comments in the questions area. So let's go ahead and get started. Aside from Dave's long list of achievements and experience, I've always appreciated the broad understanding Dave has of the overall market. Working with many large, complex organizations and technology companies, Dave brings a unique perspective into the conversation. Again, Dave, thank you so much for being with us today. So moving to setting the stage for the remainder of our session. As background, I've pre-submitted today 4 topics that I think will be important for the audience today. They are what the next 18 to 24 months has in store for the global enterprise, Which verticals have been impacted the most, and what do potential recovery times look like? Who stands to benefit from these market shifts and why? And then lastly, what are the immediate priorities for the enterprise to consider in post-recovery mode? After each of these topics, we'll pause for a question or two that will have been submitted by the audience. So with that, let's jump right into our first topic. As I mentioned before, our OSB colleagues, or Orange Silicon Valley colleagues, have been presenting webinars about COVID-19 impacts on various industries. And of course, there's vast differences from one industry to another, like air transport and other industries like healthcare and technology. We've all seen that the impact is very different from industry to industry, and we also see the companies who had invested in digital sales approaches fared far better than those who did not. If we just look at the large global enterprises like those we support here at Orange Business Services, that's a prime example of some of the trends that we've identified. So Dave, based upon what you're seeing in the market, what are your predictions as far as technology is concerned in the next 18 to 24 months?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me, and welcome everybody. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you, as Mark described, giving some insight at least to what we're seeing in the marketplace. So it is a common question that Mark just posed. We tend to, here at ISG, try to compartmentalize what we're seeing to describe the current environment. And I think, as Mark already alluded to, there's plenty of change that's happening. In fact, I think it's going to be one of the only things, and not to overuse the phrase, the only thing that is for sure is that there will be change as everybody, quite frankly, has to adjust to this new future, if you will. So looking at this chart, again, the way that we've looked at it is that we've broken it into essentially time components, if you will, and a few horizons. And outside of 18 to 24 months, which kind of frames the question as well, it's going to be a lot of guess, a lot of forecast, and guesstimates is what I would say. So moving from left to right, very specifically the role of networks in today's crisis, every enterprise has had to do a quick pivot, if you will, to adapt to the new network requirements, whether it be work restrictions or changes in business, most certainly downturns. There's been a quick adjustment to deal with those situations, and that, as you'll hear me talk about, has revealed a number of different things that have either exposed the network that an enterprise might have relative to what has not been done in carrying technical debt, for example. But for the most part, it's been a quick set of band-aids, if you will, and potentially strategic adjustments on networks if they've been positioned well already to deal with it and to move forward. Moving into the next one, the first 2 months after that initial pivot, we've seen a very specific push toward reducing costs, and that's been obviously linked to the business downturn for most enterprises experiencing in dealing with not only their own businesses, but the business of their customers. But there's been an inside look and focus on those costs. So ways to cut services that are, or I would say postpone or shelve services that are not being used today. Again, not knowing what the future is going to be has been a key focus. Working with carriers to not only stabilize the environment, but also to make sure that they are continuing to, I would say, the costs are matching the network requirements or the network usage. So an extreme focus on those costs. Second, in that what we've termed first horizon, that next 100 days, looking at what the network, what's happening in the network, in terms of that resiliency, what didn't happen and what did happen relative to those quick pivots. Time to look at adjusting the network to make sure you have, again, stabilized, but also give you the best position to move forward with, again, expected change in the near future. So making some potential investments is another thing that we've seen. So moving into that next horizon, into what would say is probably the tail end of this year, we're seeing it's more of a strategic look to say, okay, we've seen what's happening today. We've seen what the impact has been on our clients, our customers. What can we do as an enterprise? I'm speaking from a customer's perspective. What can we do as an enterprise to leverage the situation? So now the network has been exposed. It's a very keen focus on the network and what it can do and can't. Again, looking at some of the gaps that may have been realized. But what can we do to leverage that? What can we do to leverage those investments that we've made over the past 18 to 24 months to really help us now and in the future of the next 18 to 24 months? So we're seeing a nice look at the strategic side of the network. And then the last horizon noted on the slide here, what's going to be coming around for 2021, if you will. Obviously, again, a lot of forecast, guessing what's going to happen, but a lot of emphasis on flexibility to deal with what that might look like and to leverage what comes around in the next few months relative to, get back to work or maybe not getting back to work, and having your networks be able to adjust quickly to that new future, if you will. Some of the current trends specifically noting, again, as Marc mentioned, work access at home is a big focus. And again, that was a quick pivot. And for those that were able to leverage some, I would say, newer technology in the network, that move was easier than for others. But we are seeing a lot of broadband connectivity, obviously, because homes are most likely connected via broadband, and leveraging that. And we were joking before we hopped on the call here that probably one of the other issues there is obviously that you're battling or competing for bandwidth with multiple folks now that were not necessarily anticipated to be at home. So there is the issue of potential bandwidth. There is the issue that carriers are dealing with to make sure that there is ample bandwidth in and out of the home, and then obviously to the POPs that are associated with those networks. Mobile phones, again, probably a key component that has been available to most employees, but now it's become more of, we would say, a necessity and an extension of the network. And that brings along with it not only, again, capacity requirements or access to applications over that capacity or extended or increased usage on those phones, but also the security side of that expanded network is very key, and something we're seeing needs to be a focus area for most enterprises. We're also seeing, I would say, the term accelerated focus on SD-WAN. A lot of the clients we've been working with have already established, I would say, certain parts of their business or applications on SD-WAN that will give them that flexibility, and they've realized they're seeing that flexibility come into play. Others have been dabbling in SD-WAN or looking to wait until some of the required moves are dictated by older equipment. But we're seeing now a lot of that interest and then push in terms of investment and focus now to get SD-WAN into the network so it can deal with that unknown future that we just talked about earlier. The other thing that we've seen is online or virtual presence. Contact center has become a key focus. A lot of our clients are now facing off to their clients and their end users by virtue of what's seen on the web, but also how they are connecting to order taking or customer service. It's a big, a big component that our clients are now realizing they do need to focus, and they need to make sure that those contact centers have enough bandwidth and are appropriately focused and routed to the right agents to make sure that that experience is high quality and they maintain those customers. Cloud-based zero trust security at the network edge, again, looking at it from the perspective that there's been a massive increase in connect points into the network. Carrying through that security strategy, that zero trust security strategy to the true now expanded network edge is a big focus, another trend. Unified communications, again, a lot of clients have centralized UC within their enterprise. We're now seeing, I would say, a focus on looking at some of the new moves in terms of further centralization, but obviously very much a cloud-based solution, adding to the flexibility, adding to the potential cost value associated with being cloud-based as opposed to premise-based. Very much a focus point. Video collaboration. Obviously, what we're doing here is becoming the new normal for many enterprises, as well as for people that are just looking to continue that socialization. So video has become very broad in terms of what it's enabling us to do as a society, but also as enterprises to keep that communication going. And it's brought about new providers. Obviously, Zoom is getting most of the attention, but in reality, enterprises are using Teams or even Google to make sure that they can continue that business collaboration. Then lastly, we're seeing that from a cost perspective, balancing up those network upgrades against the overall benefit, even though obviously what we would say investment into the flexibility is key, but now the scrutiny of obviously spending money right now when there is a business downturn makes it a difficult balance, and again, something that we're seeing as a very consistent trend. Lastly, I would answer to the question some of the trends very specifically in some areas. Again, the pandemic has really emphasized focus on the network and really new network scenarios. On two notable areas that we wanted to mention on the call here is that obviously healthcare, top of news for many folks, and what we're seeing and hearing about all the time. Monitoring, general healthcare, which has been out there and has been progressing nicely. Obviously now pushed forward with all the different things that are going around with tracing and tracking relative to social distancing and also telemedicine, which was pushed forward by virtue of no contact. Big implications for healthcare, and it seems that there are a lot of applications and service providers that can step in to help the healthcare industry. On the retail side, again, with the closures of those traditional brick and mortar storefronts, having a network that can actually step up and support the online presence on the web, as well as processing on the back end, and the applications can continue to hum, if you will, relative to dealing with clients that are online. We're also seeing, again, kind of a trend in retail, that touchless servicing or delivery. Again, a lot of emphasis on new technology to complete that transaction, if you will, without touch, without the shopping directly in the store. So another key area. Then, well, lastly, on the retail side, seeing a lot more look to partnering with different services and service providers to, again, put together quickly a solution that can touch the consumers, but also make sure that there's a good leverage on that network that folks have been investing in. So I think that would be my answer there, Mark.
No, Dave, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing those perspectives. A lot to take in there. I appreciate your commentary around pivoting right out of the gate. In fact, I think there's still quite a bit of that going on right now. But as we've tried to emerge from all of this activity, it seems like the investments that you had mentioned, and certainly some of the areas that are being reemphasized or re-looked at, make a lot of sense and are pretty much in line with what we're seeing from our customers as well. I did appreciate also, there was kind of a point in time there where there was a tremendous focus on just band-aiding the infrastructure to adjust to the impact of COVID when it first happened. And I think we're starting to come out of that and starting to think a little bit more strategically and long term.
Yep.
That's great. So just take a quick pause here and see if we have any questions from the audience. And it looks like we do have a question from Paul. And this doesn't surprise me at all. As you know, we are a leader in all things SD-WAN for the enterprise. And so one of the questions from Paul here is, have you seen any trends that are indicating SD-WAN will move into the home based upon the forced work from home environment?
I do believe the SD-WAN per se of managing the connection, possibly even from a device perspective, they could see some movement into the home. Obviously, with the uncertainty yet as to exactly what's going to happen to is it going to be a true go forward policy? I think the flexibility is going to be key. So probably not now, but potentially in the next year and a half, as companies determine if they are actually going to be supporting the work from home as truly a new office. And an example of that actually would be our businesses. A lot of virtual, and we had already adapted to the work at home scenario, and we essentially do have SDN at home. It is something that we could definitely look forward to with other businesses as they go through this situation.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the question, Paul. So moving on to our next topic. We talked about a little bit about vertical impact just during the first topic that we just reviewed. And we understand the impact around industries like healthcare and retail, and who's kind of struggling more than others. In fact, I heard from one of our manufacturing customers recently that all the projects they presently had in motion pre-COVID have been put on hold as they start to address the transition of people coming back into the workplace and having to address what this new normal is going to look like with people on the shop floor, in the case of retail, inside the brick and mortar buildings that are starting to reopen, etc. I guess my question for you is, right, what do you see as probably being the most impacted verticals? And, is there a prediction around what recovery times may look like?
Yeah, if I had my crystal ball, I would definitely be putting something forward here. But we can talk a little bit about at least what we're seeing from a general industry perspective. And the way we've looked at it, we've been asked the question several times relative to what's happening across the industries we're seeing. And it goes without saying that all enterprises are having to work. If you look at it from a network, horizontal perspective, having to deal with the remote workers, as we talked about, the business downturn of not only their business, but also their client's business. General business transactions, if you will, how business is going to be done, as it's, again, big change. Customer acquisition and support, sales calls are no longer in person. They are done via video and email and chats, which is interesting. Great for current clients that you've already established, but the acquisition side of getting new clients is going to be obviously changed dramatically. And then general cost management. Again, it's one of the things that we've seen where in the past, pre-COVID, 18 to 24 months, we'd seen a nice investment. Many enterprises were putting dollars into new transactions. And again, when I say new transaction, new network technology. Now there is, as you mentioned, Mark, scrutiny over those investments and making sure that there is an associated ROI. I think that's pretty evident across most enterprises by virtue of what's happening and with COVID. Industry specific, again, it's probably not a secret or news to most folks, but travel-related companies, and we have several clients in that area. Huge impact, and obviously from a network standpoint, networks going idle is really the key thing that we've seen there, and having to deal with that and working with their underlying service providers to help deal with that. And then obviously just financially, they're trying to survive, and that eventual turnaround is probably going to be the longest, I think, out of most industries. Retail, brick and mortar, I think we're seeing that yes, there's been a downturn by virtue of just general shopping and consumer habits. On the flip side, and not to go over to the right arrow up in terms of the upside opportunity, online retail has obviously gone increased dramatically. So seeing one of the winners there just as a result of the retail side being locked down. I mean, sports and entertainment, again, big crowd type situations, very specifically impacted. Food service, again, some of our restaurant clients, food service clients are having to deal with online ordering and less fewer transactions just by virtue of the social distancing requirements. Automotive, from the standpoint of parts and delivery based on suppliers overseas, we've seen that the supply chain being impacted, a very obviously key component to many manufacturing areas and businesses. That supply chain impact has been key, not only on obviously the front end in terms of the buying, but also on the back end in terms of supplying. It's been a difficult adjustment for many of the automotive and many of the manufacturing areas. Education, again, a big change. And for those of you, and I know Mark, you've got one that's headed to college as well. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. The education experience is going to be probably changed forever, we would say, and more online or a mix thereof is going to be resulting. And so we're seeing probably a very, very specific hit to revenues, as well as the way that businesses or learning is transacted in the education side. Energy and resources, again, supply chain specific is what I would say, where there's been an impact by virtue of overseas business. And then we talk about manufacturing. On the plus side, again, I would say the online retail side that we've seen and investment in technology, technology enterprises or technology businesses, specifically cloud-based technology companies, is really, I would say, where the upside opportunities are, and they're the ones that are benefiting from this situation, and being able to quickly, by virtue of cloud-centric solutions or as a service solutions, being able to really jump in and provide the help where clients need it quickly. Finance, it's kind of I would say both sides of it, but it seems like there is a big benefit that's happening just in the current situation, the current environment that's floating over to and supporting. Now that does not carry over obviously into retail banking, but we do think that the larger financial firms are doing pretty well in the current situation. Transportation delivery kind of goes with the supply chain discussion we talked about. CPG, again, purchases, fewer purchases, and the types or how those purchases are delivered affects the CPG companies. Healthcare, we do think that there is, again, upside for all of those, actually. CPG, just in terms of people buying different types of products, but also healthcare in general, we talked about. And then outsourced service providers, we've seen a pretty impactful move where, again, clients are looking for service providers to do more for them in terms of solutions, not necessarily, but also inclusive of bandwidth requirements, for example, into carriers, but also do more in terms of other tasks that could be taken over by qualified firms. So definitely ups and downs in the industries, and recovery, again, best guess, we think, and we are probably aligned with most folks to say 2021 will be a good recovery for most. There will be definite changes in the way that businesses are transacting, again, and with education. But for the most part, we do believe and are very hopeful that there's going to be some sort of a solution to the COVID situation moving forward, and we can get back on track, if you will, next year.
Yep, I think that's what certainly what my personal hope is. But a lot of that makes sense considering some of the timing and the anticipation of what the answer to COVID may be. Will probably ultimately have a huge impact on overall timing. But I think that's a really great perspective that you just shared with us. We have one question from Raghu, who is asking about once COVID is countered, do you think enterprises will have to consider integrating IoT and virtual reality technology into the regular activity within their business to help address the efficiency of an experience of remote working?
Yeah, I do. And I think it does carry over into just remote monitoring, doing things in a contactless world, if you will, for the most part, or where you can. I think IoT is going to be coming forward, or that the category is going to be bringing companies forward with solutions to help in that regard. I do believe, again, the work at home is going to have a lot more contact or connections, if you will, whether it be mobile, whether it be PC, whether it be watches, monitoring, the Ring doorbells. I mean, I think, again, it brings everything forward in terms of that the virtual world. I do think automation and possibly even the virtual reality element will get a little boost from the situation here as well, because it does, the work at home does do a lot to, again, bring forward applications where you are doing more from home. So I do think that there's some push there.
Thanks for that, Dave, and thanks for the question, Raghu. Appreciate that. So let's move into our third and final topic for the day. You know, Dave, we've seen that organizations had already invested in digital technologies, in digital technologies, were able to adapt more quickly than those that had not during the COVID crisis. Another one of the customers I spoke with recently, specifically in the pharma space, said they were ready, right, just not at scale, and they were not prepared for the full scope of the security implications that needed to be addressed. However, we're able to, interestingly enough, use the same word you did, pivot quickly, adding capacity and addressing the security gaps due to the agile nature of their investments. Maybe you can take a little bit of time and talk to us about some of the technology winners and maybe folks that were not so lucky to be winners, and what may be emerging in the future from a technology perspective.
Sure, certainly. Yeah, it's again, some of this is forecasting or guesstimates, if you will, but based on what we're seeing in the marketplace in the network industry, those providers or technology that enable flexibility are going to be front and center. And that obviously goes to a bit of the things we'll talk about here in a second. But those providers that can help enable that nimbleness, if you will, and the flexibility to adjust or further pivot, either back or, again, forward, back and forward, quite frankly, but just into the new future, whatever it might be, are going to be the winners. And that, I think, also talks to the flexibility comment here, talks to and how service providers are approaching the new business transaction as well. I think that's going to shed some light and probably refine business a bit. Obviously, contracts are going to be required, but the flexibility built into the contracts are going to be key, and we think important for moving forward. As we mentioned, UCaaS and contact center as a service providers are heightened right now just by virtue of the required flexibility to move, to connect, to keep employees, keep customers connected to the enterprise is going to be key. And again, that front-facing contact center solution is a big focus. And to the extent that there is, I would say, easy integration with multiple applications, that also is going to be further elevating those UCaaS and CCaaS providers to the top of the heap to take advantage of those opportunities. Mobile service providers, as we mentioned, those providers, albeit the big ones that most people are dealing with, are gladly taking new new orders and new services and expanded usage or unlimited usage, if you will. I think there's going to be a lot more unlimited usage requests coming in, requirements, and I expect that to continue. And that the work from home is a very specific move, but we think also we're going to see more of work from anywhere, even though it's been a moniker that's been out there for some time. We believe that the combination of working from home and then working from anywhere is kind of an eventual reality that's going to be happening. And the only way that really works is to leverage the mobile service providers across the world, quite frankly. Broadband providers, as we talked about, work from home, driving a lot of that, but also, again, expanded and flexible providers in terms of bandwidth. If you could quickly turn up your bandwidth with your broadband provider and have ease of contracting, we think those providers are going to do pretty well. SD-WAN technology providers, again, a lot of the SD-WAN technology firms have been doing well in terms of, and/or there's been consolidation in the industry, obviously. We do see that there's going to be continued focus on SD-WAN, not only from the cost savings perspective that comes about with leveraging hybrid access, but also probably even more importantly with the flexibility that comes along with SD-WAN in terms of giving visibility to applications, to being able to shift access and capacity on certain applications is going to be key, again, with the uncertainty in the future. Network as a service or managed network service providers, again, we see this pandemic or this situation probably pushing forward more of those full solution providers where there's more of just a transport connection. There is more of the intelligence that goes along with it or the orchestration of the network. We think that those providers are going to do well. And then lastly, the multi-source integrators, which for us at ISG, that means integrating a number of different either similar suppliers, but we think actually and also other technology providers. So the ability for a service provider to be able to manage an ecosystem of important suppliers is going to be key. So that'll be our list of winners, I would say, Mark.
Thanks for that, Dave. We agree with a lot of that commentary as well from an overall business point of view. Certainly our focus on SD-WAN as well as multi-source integration has been a hot topic for us that we're seeing a lot of interest in from our enterprise customers. Consuming all of these types of services as well that are being driven by the work from home requirement has also aligned ourselves, I think, quite well with some of the insight that you shared with us here. So again, thanks for that. On a kind of a broad brushstroke basis, would you say that there's a common thread to any of these winners? From my personal perspective, I start thinking about common threads and what you were just sharing with us. And I think, one of the potentials is around agility. But I'd certainly be interested in your perspective on, what you see as a common thread here as well.
Yeah, agility, Mark, is what I would absolutely agree, which is enabled by the flexible networks and the services, but also the contracts that go around those services, I would say. So again, nimbleness, flexible, being able to pivot, not to overuse that word, but and then also integration with different connection points where we're not all, we're at a point where I think it is somewhat of an inflection point where the number of connections to a network is going to even grow just by virtue of, as we talked about, IoT, but also mobile devices and PCs, et cetera. It's having that integration and that flexibility for the network is going to be key. And then also, I would say again, and actually we'll probably talk about it in the last takeaway: security. Plugging into the solution here is the security of the network, because it is expanding so quickly. To make sure that you have ample security policies and tools enabled in your network is going to be key.
Great, thanks for that. So let's move on to our last topic for the session today, because I know we're coming up on time. From a post-recovery perspective, what do you see as one of the most important priorities or investments that an enterprise may or should be focused on at the moment?
Yep. So, and we talked a little bit about it already, Mark, just in terms of that, the quality and the flexibility, or and being able to pivot. Quality primarily because, again, so many key applications are going to be carried on the network, and the network performance has really elevated. So continuing that quality or improving the quality is going to be key. And then that flexibility around the network is absolutely a top priority as well. That you could say the network resiliency, by virtue of just building in that resiliency, whether it be in terms of the redundancy, but also the ability of, as an example, SD-WAN to control networks quickly. But you have to have obviously an underlying network design that supports that those moves. So looking at network resiliency and how it's going to support the new future with connectivity, again, mobile phones and or work from home contact center agents is going to be key. Application performance, absolutely key as well, because the business is running now on the obviously on the network, but also most certainly connecting to cloud applications. So performance of those applications and less downtime, quicker throughput, going to be absolutely important. Cost savings, another element we think is going to result here. So applications or solutions that are driving cost efficiency are going to be key, and making sure that that you're buying appropriately and contractually is also going to be key. And then that operational flexibility, all the different services that you're putting into your network and all the things you're doing around the network should be designed to support the business objectives. And so that alignment with the business is going to be key. And investments obviously are going to be now scrutinized by virtue of cost containment. So having those the better alignment of investment in the network to the actual business outcome is going to be key.
Thanks for that, Dave. Again, much appreciate you sharing that perspective. I truly believe we're watching a lot of additional transformative activities continuing to happen at an accelerated rate. I think we're coming up on time here, and I don't know that we have another question from the audience, so maybe we'll just wrap up really quick. Again, Dave, thank you for some of your insights. They were certainly informative. I'm confident our audience enjoyed listening to your perspectives. a lot to take in today. You know, topics that we covered included managing costs to match the network utilization, investments that are starting to become more opportunistic right now to prepare for what the return to work will ultimately look like. I love the comment you made about watching the network go idle, right, and having to, you know, figure out what to do with that as we return to work in the future. I agree with you also wholeheartedly that the concept of education, as we probably knew it growing up, is going to be far different in the future based upon some of the things that have transpired as of late. And what that whole experience is going to look like will be much different. And I also believed it was interesting to hear you align with us in our thinking that a lot of the cloud-based businesses have certainly come out on top of the food chain as a result of having to be working from home as well. Appreciated the comments on MSI. We believe that too. It's a really important part of our portfolio, and certainly everything we talked about SD-WAN related is always very exciting for us. So moving forward and wrapping up here really quick, Kathy is going to be posting on the chat space for us the link to the entire Business Resilience in All-Time webinar series. If the dates have already passed for those events, the replays will be available through that link as well. And also, of course, the events that are coming up with some of my colleagues here in the coming weeks. And as we close out for the day, Dave, it's always a pleasure to have some of your time. And I truly appreciate you spending it with us today during our webinar entitled Emerging Enterprise IT Trends Post-COVID. We were very grateful for you joining us. I wanted to say a huge thank you to ISG, a huge thank you to our audience and their questions that they submitted today. I hope you found this session valuable. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with your day with us as well. Of course, if you have any questions or want to talk about any of these topics in any greater detail, please don't hesitate to reach out at either one of the email addresses that are presently on your screen. I say to everyone, stay safe, be well, and remember, today changes with Orange. Have a great day.